folks, we met yesterday, but once again, my name is Mr. Hempstead. Before we get into today's lesson, I just want to take a little bit of time and show you guys the classroom. There's a decent chance, I think, that you guys will actually get to be in here, and so here it is. This is just kind of the front of the classroom and the whiteboard and things like that. We've got my desk space over there. It's a little bit messy right now. I would like to lie and say that it's just because of COVID, but in truth, it's always a little messy. We got the nice windows, textbooks, very good. The schedule, the calculators, a little library with the bookshelves over there, little crates where you guys will be able to keep papers and stuff, periodic tables, smartboard, lab stuff, and yeah, that's the classroom. There you go. Cool. And as you can see up in the upper corner there, our target today is to be able to identify lab equipment that we will be using. One piece of feedback that I've gotten from previous groups of students is they'd like to know more about just kind of the relevancy piece behind the science that we are doing. Why are we learning about lab equipment? Why are we learning about science at all? What's the point of all of this? And so that's something that I'm going to try and do a really good job of doing this year, is just making sure you guys are always understanding why. And especially with something like today, why are we learning about lab equipment when we're in an online platform? What's the point? What are we gaining from this? Well, for starters, like I said earlier in the video, I think there's a very good chance that you guys will be up in the lab with me this semester. Probably not immediately, like not in the first quarter section, but I think definitely second quarter, there's a very good possibility that we'll be in lab, and we'll see. It's hard to say, but we'll see. So if we're gonna be in lab, that means we need to know what the different materials in lab are, okay? Even if you're not in lab with me this semester, you will be in lab as your sophomore year goes, as your junior year and your senior year goes. You'll have a bunch of different science classes. And so just knowing the names of common lab equipment is really important, because you'll be using it and you need to know what it's called. If the instructions say grab a 25 milliliter graduated cylinder, you need to know what a graduated cylinder is so that you can properly do the lab and get good results and hit that learning target for that day. Additionally, if you go on to college, you're gonna have to take a science course. It's pretty much a requirement for any college anywhere that you take a lab course. So there's that. And then last but not least, it's really just good information to have. It's important to be able to integrate yourselves with all different kinds of aspects about people's lives. So if other people are talking about these words, you know what they are, you know what they're talking about. Okay. But yeah. Oh, there is actually one more point now that I think about it. We're going to be doing labs even in an online learning platform. Even within this next kind of week segment, there's a lab that I've got planned for Tuesday. And so sometimes the instructions will say, use a beaker or equivalent, something like that. So I'll have you use the equivalent of a beaker that you'll find in your house. And we'll talk about that more on Friday. All right, now that I've told you the why, let's focus on actually hitting today's target. In order to hit today's target, you are going to need a couple of things. You're going to need the notes for today's lesson. It's going to be a bit of a lecture today. It's titled Lab Equipment. There's a little note sheet. You can either print it off, write things in, take a picture of it, and submit it to me in the assignment section, which I frankly would recommend, just because then you have a physical copy, which will be helpful on Friday. Or you can choose to just do it all electronically. You can upload pictures to the document electronically, and you can just type into the document. If you think that's going to work better for you, do that. Okay, but anytime there is a blank box in these notes, that box does need to be filled in. We're going to be breaking this video up into 2 chunks just so that the video doesn't get too long and so that you guys have a natural break about halfway through. All right, let's get into it. So number 1, I am made of glass. I often hold liquids. and am used commonly for heating. I have rough volume markings. So that is going to be the beaker. And I've got two different beakers here. Beakers come in all kinds of different sizes. We've got big beakers that can hold large amounts of liquids. We've got smaller beakers that hold smaller amounts of liquids. And you can see on both of these beakers, we've got some fairly rough measurement markings. If I told you to get 25 or 50 mils of water or 100 mils of water, there are rough measurement markings, and so you could approximately get the amount of liquid you would need using a beaker. Okay. By the way, this is just food coloring in water, if you're wondering. All right, so on your piece of paper, what you should do for number 1, you should write beaker into the blank space right there, and then you should draw a sketch or upload a picture of a beaker and just kind of write, what is a beaker used for? What does it do? What will you use it for? Why is it useful? Any of the above would be a perfectly fine thing to put in that last box there. Number 2, I'm used to measure the length of certain objects. There are 2 tools that kind of fit into this category. One is the meter stick and one is the ruler. We'll use both of these, and when we're using them, we're always going to be measuring in centimeters and meters. In other words, we'll be using the metric system. So we're not going to measure things in inches, we're not going to measure things in feet. We'll be using the metric system. Meter stick / ruler. And we'll get more into that next week, using the metric system and things like that. Cool. All right. Let's see, the next one, we have a narrow neck. We hold liquids that may splatter. This one is going to be the Erlenmeyer flask, and I can bring this one a little bit closer. You can see that with the Erlenmeyer flask, it's kind of got a tapered neckline, and the reason is because if we've got a hot solution in here that's bubbling and boiling and popping, it's going to be less likely for that solution to come out. It's commonly used in acid and base units where we're mixing acids and bases together. They tend to get a little bit foamy sometimes, and that just helps keep it trapped in the container. So, the spelling on number 3 is a little bit tricky. It is called an Erlenmeyer flask. By the way, feel free to pause the video at any point in time. I recognize I'm talking quickly. That's in part to help keep the video short, so it's easier to upload. But feel free to pause it or slow it down to 3/4 speed if you go to the YouTube link. Glass, and I'm concave. This is the eyeglass. Okay. Eyeglasses are really useful for we could set it, for example, let's just say we are heating something in a beaker and we're concerned that something could pop out of the beaker. We could set the eyeglass on top of the beaker, kind of like a pot lid on a pot, and that would prevent the substance from shooting out of the container quite as easily. There's still a little bit of a nozzle, a nose, for any gases or things or vapors to vent out. So it's not going to become pressurized, but it will trap down any large quantities of chemical inside the container. It's also really useful for just observing small quantities of chemical. You can take a small sample of solution, you can set it into the eyeglass, and you can more accurately observe it. If there's some particulate or something in the liquid, you can better view that particulate. There we go. Okay. Number 4, eyeglass / watch glass. Sometimes people call them watch glasses. I'll typically use the word eyeglass, but you may occasionally see the word watch glass. Okay. Next up is the crucible. Here we go. Crucibles are really great for heating solutions of liquids very quickly. We can set it directly underneath a Bunsen burner and it won't crack or something like that. That is something that we have to be cautious of with something like a beaker. It cracks much more easily. The porcelain is just a little bit more sturdy and it's more heat absorptive, so it's going to get hotter faster. Crucible. There we go. Okay, next. We've got the pipette, which you actually saw me demonstrating a little bit earlier. The pipette is very useful for just transferring small amounts of liquids from one container to another. You just squeeze the bulb, it sucks liquid up, and You can squeeze the bulb a second time and it shoots the liquid back out. And I recognize that was a little bit fast, so just in case you didn't see the pipette, here's what it looks like. There you go. Okay, sounds good. That was number 6, so number 7. Metal rod with an upright base. That would be the iron ring stand. There we go. So you can go ahead and draw in a little picture of that iron ring stand. Okay. The iron ring stand is really useful for elevating certain chemicals. What we can do is we can attach things to this iron stand and we can suspend chemicals in the air. Let's say I've got like a Bunsen burner or something underneath and I want to use that Bunsen burner to heat up a chemical. We'll use the iron ring stand. We'll actually use that quite a bit over the course of the year. Whenever we need to suspend something, that's how we are going to do it. Okay. Tool used to measure mass. You guys probably know this one. You used it a bunch when you were in 8th grade with Mr. Peliquin. Number 8 is the triple beam balance. We're going to be working with this quite a bit over the course of the year. It's a really useful tool. It's also one of the most accurate tools we have. Triple beam balance. There we go. It's really good at accurately, like super crazy accurate, like to the 0.1 gram accuracy, measuring just how much stuff, how much mass something has. If I want to take some goggles, for example, and I want to know the mass of these goggles, how much goggle is there, the triple beam balance is the tool that I will use to do that. Okay. And number 9, I am made of wood, metal, or plastic. I hold tubes in a vertical position. That one is going to be the test tube holder or the test tube rack. You'll use this more in biology with Miss Kirsten, the other science teacher in the high school, but a test tube rack. But it's really useful when you've got 12 different test tubes. You've only got 2 hands. But with the test tube holder or the test tube rack, you can just take a test tube, set it in the rack, and ta-da! You can very easily observe how much liquid is in it, or solid, or your sample, or whatever. Because it's very small, it's very thin, and it's very easy to see into. Cool. Like I said, I'll be splitting this video up into 2 parts, just to help with transferring the video along and things like that, so stay tuned for part 2.